Welcome, everyone. It's yours truly, David Morgan of morganreport.com. And almost every interview you hear, it's, oh, I've got a special guest or whatever. This is truly special. It is the one, the only Catherine Austin Fitts. Catherine, welcome.
Welcome, David. And I think, what is the anniversary of our being in cahoots? We've been in cahoots since the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, right? 98 or 99, right?
Somewhere in there in
Right.
Mexico. And I forget the name of the conference, but wow, so much.
It's amazing. So I've known you for 26 years, and you other than growing a beard, you look the same.
Oh, thank you. That's flattery will get you everywhere. Oh, that's fun. Well, there's so many topics we could cover, but one that's come up over and over for me is the next financial system. My contention is the bankers don't want to lose control. I wrote an article about Bitcoin in 2016, my 2 bits about Bitcoin. I said, look, if this thing really gains traction, watch out, the government will take it over. Or actually, I said the money powers will take it over. And that seems to be the case. So before we go to Bitcoin, which is
You can't take over something you started. Come on.
Yeah, right. Thank you. I did put in that missive that I thought the NSA was involved, and I got that from Richard Grove because I was going to all the people I knew and trusted for information that I might not have. As a good, researcher, good thinker, I'll say that about myself. And Richard came up and said, "Man, I think this is an NSA operation. Take a
Well,
look."
it's so funny. I'll never forget being in. So I was at a Bitcoin conference or a crypto conference in 2017. And right before I got there, I was in Basel, Switzerland. So I drive by the BIS, go to the Swiss railway station to buy a ticket to go to Zurich from Basel. And they offered me the opportunity to pay with Bitcoin and to top up my Bitcoin wallet from Swiss Railway, right next door to the BIS. And I said, this is very top down because you have the Swiss promoting, and of course, Zug was a big center for, crypto. They were trying to lead crypto. And I got to this conference. It was at the Aspen Institute, and everybody's talking about, the revolution. And I said, trust me, the revolution will not meet at the Aspen Institute. Anyway, but everybody's talking about the revolution, and they said the central bankers hate Bitcoin. And I said, central bankers love Bitcoin because while the smart money is scarfing up all the farmland and the gold and the silver, they've got you buying digital bits. They are keeping retail out of precious metals and farmland, but really precious metals. And the whole audience looked at me like, what? It was obvious to anybody who was dealing at the retail level to watch the giant sucking sound of people out of buying gold and silver and into buying sort of digital bits created out of thin air.
Well, I did a series called The Crypto Conspiracy. It's 30 podcasts, took probably almost a year. And we had the premise that a lot of money that would have gone into gold and silver went into Bitcoin instead. Who was the biggest advocate of don't buy gold, buy Bitcoin? Oh, Jeffrey Epstein. And that's provable. And so those interested, go to morganreport.com, hit the blog tab, type in Crypto Conspiracy in the search engine because there's like 2,000 articles or something on there. It'll bring up all 30. But one of the maps goes from MIT to Epstein to Bill Gates to all the usual suspects. So I have believed from pretty much the start, as you've indicated, that it's a setup, and it was an action to divert funds that might have gone to precious metals and land, as you say, very important.
Yes. So I think the primary goal, I think that was one of the ways it got used. It got used in many different ways. It's still being used. But I think the primary goal was to prototype programmable money. And you always want to get the freedom fighters working for you. So I think it was a way of taking all the talent who would never help you build programmable money and getting them prototyping programmable money, and in a very dynamic way. And it's a very smart tactic. I saw them do it on Wall Street all the time, but it's very clever. And I think it worked. I think it was very, very successful. So I just have to send you one more link from our website. It's a commentary I wrote called "Was Jeffrey Epstein the Father of Programmable Money?" And it points you to, I think, the best thing on Epstein after Whitney Webb's two books. This is the next thing you must read on Epstein. It's called "Was Jeffrey Epstein the Father of Programmable Money?" It links to the Substack, which is written by somebody who's writing under a pseudonym of ESC, as in Escape. And he documents all the different things. First of all, he does an excellent job of describing how the Rothschild family networks work. And Epstein is an agent for the Rothschilds, which is, a big pot of the equity money around the central banks. So great job of describing sort of how the system works. But then he describes how Epstein literally for years built programmable money. And then once you could institutionalize it, you don't need any anymore, and he gets thrown overboard. So it's very good. And if you want to understand the relationship between Bitcoin and crypto and the control grid, it's an excellent piece to read.
Thank you for that. Well, I'd go to the next step, which in my logic is stablecoins. So now we've got Bitcoin, all these tag along, these crypto, these meme coins, all this nonsense, in my opinion. And along comes, oh yeah, USDC, well, stablecoins. And the principles behind that are rather shady as well, at least from the beginning. Having said that, to me, it looks like it's a way to take a new buyer for the U.S. debt. Looking at T-bills, they get the interest, you don't, but you get a stable coin. What's your comments on what the stable coin?
So we have a wonderful briefing on stablecoins. I sent you the link, and I would suggest you post it. We do monthly briefings for state legislators, and we did one on stablecoin, and that's the video presentation. Stablecoin has several goals. The first goal is to basically shift people out of local banking systems all around the world, whether it's here in Tennessee or, in Bolivia or in Eastern Europe or even in Europe. And if you can reach them through the mobile payment systems, you can shift them out of their local currency into a crypto coin that's basically like trading a little T-bill. So you're right. It's shifting money out of local circulation for a small business enterprise, and the private economy into the treasury market. And it's basically converting local economies into Soviet economies that are centrally controlled, because now you're piping the money up into the federal credit. So remember Ross Perot's giant sucking sound? Get ready for a giant sucking sound of economies, local economies all around the world, from Bolivia to here in Tennessee, out of the local banking system and into stablecoins. One of the chief reasons they haven't passed the Clarity Act. Genius Act passed last year for stablecoins. Clarity Act is under debate now for digital assets. And one of the reasons they're fighting is the fintech firms want to be able to honey trap you into all of this with high rewards and interest rates. And the banks don't want that because they can hear the giant sucking sound too. So this is a big debate. I just got an email from Coinbase offering 14% if I would keep minimum balances in Coinbase. I didn't go in and look at the terms and conditions, so I have no idea what the real number is. But, they're going to use honey to trap you in. I saw a presentation by the head of Coinbase saying they're going to trade perpetual markets 24/7. You can trade the global stocks on their platform. Are you ready with this? 20 times margin. 20 times margin. Okay, so Kraken just did a deal with NASDAQ and has been given access, according to the Wall Street Journal, to the Fed settlement systems. And that's for 24/7 trading of the global stock markets. And, with digital assets. Now, you got 250 trillion in global bonds and stocks. They're talking about creating another 250 trillion of digital assets to trade them. How the two relate to each other, I'm not clear. But at 20 times margin, David, you're talking about the bubble of all, you ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to bubbles. So, people are always saying, oh, they're going to do this horrible thing to get us in the control grid and that horrible thing. No, they're going to buy you in. Do you know what I mean? This is a honey trap.
How do you see this playing out? I mean, there's resistance, and I want to throw this into your thoughts. But I'm on the Sound Citizens for Sound Money. I'm on the board of directors, and there are 14 states that basically have legislated what we really had in the Constitution. You can use gold and silver as a means of payment in certain states.
No, if you look at what they're proposing with gold and silver in the States, it's a honey trap. It's not gold and silver. They're proposing digital systems. And if you look at the digital systems they're proposing, they're worse. So, they're not gold and silver. They're more digital systems that can be turned into programmable money. And the fraud and expense could be ridiculous. And if anything, it's creating competition with the local dealers in a way which is horrible. It's proposing the state mandate highly expensive systems that, in my opinion, are not responsible, are not run, as responsibly as they could get in the private market. And you don't need the state to pick winners and losers in the private markets for products that anybody can use. So I can understand why states, I love gold and silver, so I would love to see the states buying significant positions in gold and silver and having bullion depository. And once they make all of that available to the citizens and they're good at doing what they're doing, if they want to add a digital component, as long as it's redeemable and it's under state sovereignty and the state controls, great, that's fine. That's not what's being proposed. What's being proposed, in my opinion, is not sound money and will turn into a mess.
I mean,
So-
like a state depository, state has control, get a bunch of bureaucrats, get 10 people to do the job that one person would do in private enterprise.
No. Trust me, you want the state employees doing it. The last thing you want is corporate contractors. They're bringing in MasterCard, which is one of the top firms in the control grid. It's just another form of programmable money is what it looks like to me it's going to involve in, but it's a way of tricking the sound money people into doing just this. So let me explain the state of play. Let's take a state like Tennessee, okay? Because the bill for transactional gold just went out of committee yesterday in a way that was so sad. I mean, it was so sad. So in Tennessee, what percent of the population own gold and silver?
1%, 2%?
Maybe 5%. Okay.
Oh, in Tennessee. Okay.
If we're generous, maybe 10%. Okay.
Right.
How much gold do the central bankers have? Most of it, right?
Most of it.
What do people in Tennessee have? They have bank deposits and they have land. Okay. If the only way they can transact is with gold and silver, they're going to have to sell their land and buy gold from the central bankers. It puts them in a short squeeze. It's the worst thing that can happen. So they have bank deposits and they have land, and you want to do everything you can to protect the value that they have in their bank deposits and land. And you want to encourage them to buy gold and silver, which if the state buys it for itself, in its either its rainy day funds or its pension funds, and builds or makes accessible a trustworthy bullion depository, that will make it possible for many people, many more people in Tennessee to buy gold and silver. Let's say the state makes a sovereign coin, all sorts of stuff. There's a huge amount they can do. They're not doing that. They're jumping way ahead to another programmable money digital system, which is not what we need. What we need is to preserve analog, and we need the gold and silver system to build up from a strong analog. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the digital system being put in place is taking the states in a terrible direction.
All right. Well, tell me more. What else can the states do then?
Okay, so there are many things the states can do, and I sent you a link. We published essentially a manual 2 years ago called What the States Can Do. And it's everything the states can do to protect financial freedom. And there are many different aspects. We have focused on 2 pieces of model legislation. I sent you a link to, I've been testifying in some of the states on our model legislation. The first is to protect cash. And the beauty of protecting cash, David, is the only way you can do programmable money is if you get an all digital, or effective way is if you get an all digital financial system. And so one of the things each individual can do, each family, each business, everybody on Main Street can do is to preserve cash. And there are many different reasons to preserve cash. to me, the most important is to stop the control grid. But the other thing is when there are disasters, when there are emergencies, electronics and telecommunications don't work. You have to ask the people in East Tennessee or Western North Carolina, ask the people in New Zealand when the cyclones came through, ask the people in Europe when, they had their disasters. All around the world, the clear message is if you don't have cash, you're at risk. But the other thing is inflation. If I bring $100 into your community and I spend it in thousands of transactions going around your community, after 1,000 transactions, we have $100, right? It's anywhere from 10 to 1,000 transactions, depending on what you use and how you use it. If it's electronic, money all gone. It's a negative interest rate charge. The fees that these companies are taking out as intermediaries are extraordinary. And if a small business, you have many small businesses on Main Street, if you look at how thin their margins are, that using cash is the difference between being profitable and losing money and having to go out of business. Okay. So there are many good reasons to use cash. It's interesting, and I said this in the testimony, in the United States, about 19%, as of the Federal Reserve survey in 2024, still use cash. However, if you look at certain groups, people under 30, the number goes to 30%, don't have credit cards. So if you go to low income, 25,000 or less, 54% don't have credit cards. Okay. Now, I live in a county in Western Tennessee, Hardeman County. Our per capita income is $22,580. Okay. That means the majority of people in my county, on average, 54% of them don't have credit cards. Okay. If the businesses stop using cash, we're facing enormous discrimination, or we're being forced to get credit cards or gift cards, or, go to these kiosks and get cash cards that soaks off our money when we can least afford it. Okay. Anyway, so for many reasons, whether it's, proper management of your money, not being under surveillance. The other thing, many people don't, in my area, don't want to use cash because they don't want to be subject to identity theft and cybercrime. And using cash protects you from all those games and all that fraud and problems. So anyway, so the first thing we can all do is keep cash alive. Well, I should say the first thing we can all do is pray. The second thing we can do is keep cash alive. So don't let the system go to all digital, because that's what they need to really make the evil in the system work. And the evil in the system, as you know, is utter and complete control, which is, when people fight me on this and say, oh, well, this is a theoretical risk, this is what I say. Mr. Jones, this is the government calling. You have 3 children. We've decided you will transgender one. And if you don't agree, and it's fine with us if you pick which one, we're indifferent. But if you don't agree, we're going to turn off your money and you won't be able to feed the other 2. That's what programmable money is.
So that is a great briefing on cash. Now, you proposed or implemented, I guess is a better word, Cash Friday from Solari. Can you?
Cash Friday, but now we have Cash Campaign 2026. So we started off saying, look, just use cash on Friday. And then we did Cash Halloween, which is instead of giving people candy, instead of giving kids candy, give them a dollar bill with a little explanation of why they should use cash, which is the best marketing tool, because all the kids come to your house, they get a dollar bill, and they go home and tell their parents they ought to use cash. Anyway, so then we came up with the cash legislation to help get government to protect people's right to use cash, and the government's use of cash and businesses' use of cash. But what has happened is the emergencies and disasters have really picked this up, and now it's spreading virally. And of course, that viral spread is as more and more small businesses understand, if I don't use cash, they're going to use the electronics to get all my data and use that data to take away my business, right? And to outcompete me, because it's you got your competitors having access to lots of your private data. But so there's a viral spread happening, but then there's, the crypto guys offering, oh, come into Coinbase and use our crypto and we'll give you 14%. So there's a honey trap that we're competing with. And it's very interesting to see the back and forth of the people who understand, and the real ones are the young ones who understand the power of privacy. And, so there's a ton of information. If you come into Solari, we have a financial transaction freedom website. We have a team cash section. We have unbelievable amounts of sort of materials that might want to help you. And we have hats that say make cash great again. So anyway, so cash, the second model legislation we have is stopping programmable money. And this gets back to your point about states' rights. States, under the Constitution, any powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states. And the states have the ability to put up guardrails to say, no, you can't do a Chinese credit system. You can't use money in this state that strips people of their constitutional rights through programmable money. Anyway, so we have model legislation. We're trying to get that through. And it's interesting, Utah passed a bill that put up those guardrails, but delayed implementation because we haven't seen the regulations on the Genius Act and the Clarity Act hasn't passed. So people are saying, I hate to do regulations before I know what their regulations are. Now, my attitude is you don't need to see their regulations to know that this should not be allowed in your state. Because what we're saying is you can't use money to strip constitutional rights from any citizen. And it's okay to put up those guardrails before the regs. And it's okay because the market's exploding now. The market's not waiting. So we see both on stablecoins and digital assets, the volume is growing dramatically. And you can't wait to put up those guardrails because the market's not waiting to put up, to put out the stuff. Anyway, so this legislation basically says you can't do it in the state. Utah's passed one, put up the guardrails, delayed implementation until they, that means if there's something in the Clarity Act that requires fine tuning, that gives them a year to do it. Tennessee didn't want to do it. They want the banking association has said, no, we want to see what the regs are. And our attitude is, wait, you didn't need to see the regs to outlaw CBDC. This is just private CBDC sneaking in, from behind the, it's so funny because people say it's private. It's like, wait a minute. You're saying if the New York Fed issues CBDC, that's not okay. But if the banks that own the New York Fed issue the CBDC, that's okay. Wait, I don't, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. I don't get it. And it's very much this game of you're not being censored because Twitter is a private company and it's censoring you. And then you find out, oh, there's a pipeline. We have a great article in Solari about the Genius Act that describes the pipeline coming from Treasury that can set up a rule system. And whatever the rules are, a stablecoin issuer, whether it's in a state, whether it's across the pond, whether it's anywhere in the United States, whether it's a bank or fintech, they all have to plug into that rule system and program their money with that program. Okay. So it's set up to institute, and you're saying the Treasury is a different place than the central bank? I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is if you look at the US budget, it's $6 trillion a year, 4 trillion comes from revenues, 2 trillion comes from the central bank, right? The United States is completely in a debt trap. It doesn't have financial sovereignty. And that pipeline is going to be controlled by the same guys who would control the CBDC pipeline. It's just more convenient for them because they don't have to do any of the tech or customer support, right?
Right.
Have private guys do it. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. And yet you understand the financial system. So you understand why there's no, essentially there's no difference in terms of the risk.
Right.
Many people get confused.
Take me out a couple of years, 3, 4, hypothetical, of course. What do you see as the end game? You see a real ID and that you've got to sign up for universal basic income and do as you outlined, you get 3 kids and you do this or else?
So the real
resistance where we can push back and start living on organic food, clean air, and some clean water.
So here's the thing. The real vision is so psychopathic that it's very hard for people to um, believe that it's true.
Mhm.
And you have to understand the people who are running the planet don't look at you and me as the same species as they. And what they want is they've now created a technological infrastructure where it's much easier and risk-free for them to have a much smaller population. So they would like to see significant depopulation, on a steady basis, which is what they've been doing since the financial coup started in America. They've been steadily lowering life expectancy and steadily lowering fertility. So these are long-term trends. But if you look at what they're doing now with closing down the straits, right, coming into planting season, I mean, it looks to me like we may be facing an intentional engineering to engineer massive famine, very significant famine, and energy lockdowns. This time it won't be COVID. It'll be, oh, we can't afford we have to preserve gas for national security. So, we've seen these kinds of restrictions now in Thailand, Peru. It's coming on around the world as the straits remain closed. So, they want to reduce population, but what they want with the population that they're managing is they want to delegate the governance structure to an AI infrastructure like a social credit system that can do surveillance and institute spatial control and financial control at a one-by-one level. And that's why you need all these massive data centers and extraordinary satellites and surveillance systems. So if you look at the control grid, we have a great collection, David, at the Solari report called the Fast Approaching Control Grid. And generally, we describe the control grid in three pieces. One, and to me, the most important, is the programmable money. And that's what Solari is really committed to trying to stop. And we'd love your help to take the model legislation and get that run and passed in your state. Programmable money and spatial control as well depend on a very high quality digital ID system, ideally with biometrics. That's what the real deal and all the real ID and the biometrics is all about. And then there's the third part we describe as the hardware and software infrastructure that supports the surveillance and implementation of rules. So it's the tracking of people, it's the application of rules, it's the enforcement of rules through the programmable money and the spatial control. So part of the control is not we can just turn off your money, it's we can turn off your car with the kill switch. So there's definitely spatial control is definitely in the mix. And it's been very hard I've been describing the control grid for many, many years, as you know. It's very hard for people to fathom the end game, even when the World Economic Forum says it's 2030 and you have no assets. They just can't fathom that end game exists because it's so psychopathic if you're not at the top looking down on the whole system. So that is one. But now, as it's getting realer and realer, particularly the data centers, the flock cameras, the hardware that's going in so people can see it. It's hard to see the central banking system. It's hard to see the financial system. You're trained in that world, you can see it, but many people can't see it. It's very hard to see that invisible control grid because so much of it is invisible and done by telecommunications and satellite and wireless technology. But as the flock cameras go up, as the data centers go up, as all of that stuff wastes an enormous amount of water and energy, and it's very environmentally damaging, they're starting to realize, wait a minute, we are paying a fortune of taxpayers' money to fund a whole infrastructure that's going to be used to destroy our freedoms. And the pushback against the flock cameras is a perfect example. People are up in arms because you're spending a fortune of my money instead of doing basic municipal services or providing reasonable education. You're using that money to do surveillance on me in a system that's not secure and anybody can hack it. It's a real, it's funny because when Britain tried to implement the mandate for the digital ID, the former head of MI6 came out and said, you put all this data into one big database, that is a major national security risk. It's going to be hacked. It's going to be stolen. You are asking for trouble. Now, when the head of MI6 says this is insane, it's pretty bad. Anyway, so those are the three pieces. You can learn all about this. We have great legislative briefings. You can sign up for both our newsletter and our newsletter at Financial Transaction Freedom. We would love to have your help. I want to mention we just published something called Coming Clean, which is a republication of a collection we've been aggregating since 2004, because here's the little secret, and one of the reasons I'm such an optimist, David. Who's financing the control grid? Who's building the control grid? If you look at who's building and who's financing it, it's us. Yeah. We're banking at the banks that did the great financial crisis and stole 21 trillion from the US government. We're banking at these banks, okay? And we are going to work at these companies and building the control grid. We're building the hardware and the software. If you look at our 401ks and IRAs and brokerage accounts, we're financing them, right? And I'm not financing them. I doubt you are financing them. But most of my audiences are full of people who they love how much money they're making on building the control grid. It's like, okay, don't ask me to stop what you finance. If millions of you are going to put all your money in building a control grid, or put all your taxes and let your municipality build a control grid, because people keep saying, what am I doing? I said, I've been doing everything I can think of since 1991. How long is that? That's 34 years. I've been doing everything I can think of for 34 years, everything. But I'm not up against the bad guys. I'm up against the American people who are enjoying making money on building the control grid, right?
Red button.
Yep, that's it. That's the red button story. So anybody wants to hear the red button story, you can look it up on YouTube or on our website, but it's an explanation of how everybody's happy to make the control grid, make money on the control grid. And it's like, I'm making money, whoopee. So here's the sad thing about it, because I know so many wonderful, wealthy people who are saying, I can't do what you do because I'll offend somebody and then they could give me trouble and I could hurt my business. And and I have a family and I have to protect, I have $100 million I have to protect. And I said, honey, when they snap this into place, that's their 100 million. It's gone. It's not your money. And so it's funny because when I came out of the litigation, I thought I could go back to making money. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I learned was, because I figured, okay, fight's over. We all go back to cooperating, no hard feelings. I discovered there were some grudges there. So I spend every dime I have on trying to stop the control grid, because I know they can take it away just like that. They've done it to me before. They could do it again. That money is better out invested in making real change because I know if they get a 100% digital control grid, they're taking everything.
Well, you said you're optimistic. What you just said didn't make me all that optimistic. So.
I am very optimistic. I think the question is, how much pain does it take for 10% of the population to decide, okay, we got to do something, get off the couch? I can't tell you, stop listening to the Iraqi dinar fraud, stop listening to the quantum financial fraud, stop listening to maritime can get me out of this fraud, stop listening to QAnon, stop listening to all that stuff, and get down, meet your local state representative in the Senate and the House, and get to work stopping this, because we can stop it. But, and get everybody in your community using cash. And now that they've decided to shut down the straits and shut off fertilizer before the planting season, for heaven's sakes, we've got farmers going out of business daily. all across Europe and the United States, there is a war on farmer. And let me tell you something, if you don't have farmers and ranchers locally and gardeners that you can trust, you're not going to have food. Your only option is going to be lab grown meat, which is going to poison you.
Yeah.
So, if you've got money in the companies and banks that are building the control grid, but you're not financing your local farmer, you are committing an act of financial suicide.
Wow. Well, I think you've summed up my main points. I just want to give it right back to Catherine. Thank you for your time. Glad you're back in the States. You're looking healthy yourself. And
Yeah.
you want to summarize everything. And again, what I will do is take what you sent me and I'll put it in the show notes on my webmaster, make all those links if that's okay, so people can dive deeper because there's a lot of digging to do to understand just how evil this criminal organization runs the planet.
I don't think you have to work hard. We all have read the Bible, right?
Okay.
Right. Okay. So this is pretty simple. The one thing I will say, there's a lot of really negative Christian programming that says, oh, it's the mark of the beast. It's inevitable. There's nothing you can do. So just stay home on the couch and don't do anything. That's ridiculous. God helps those who help themselves. Get off the couch and get into your legislature and start making sure that, divine law guides your state and you don't turn it over to Satan because you're too lazy and some crazy programming at church. If you look at the financing of who's financing all this crazy programming, don't let it happen. Anyway, so I don't know, David, I look like I've totally depressed you.
No. I've got issue with my eyes and they flared up. It's
Okay. Well, I do want to thank you because, for a couple of years until not too long ago, I would have a back and forth with Greg Hunter on USA Watchdog where he would yell at me because I was buying silver and not gold. And I kept saying, look, silver's on sale. It's on sale. It's on sale. And I'll never forget the first show when, silver flies up. And I said, well, I guess the sale is over. But you've been telling people for decades that silver's on sale.
yes,
So,
I have. And
yeah,
it's come to fruition, and it's a happy day for a lot of people, but somewhat sad also with it kind of portends the future. But
I know.
I've read the book too. I mean, in the end, we win.
Right.
That's pretty clear. So what struggles do we have to go through to get there? Well, that remains to be determined. But people like you that devoted basically your life to telling the truth and giving us exit strategies. I don't want to keep you any longer. It's just been a really good time. I feel like I'm in there with you. I'm there electronically, but honestly, I catch almost everything you say, and kudos all over the place. I mean, Tucker Carlson, and then Professor Wiener.
That was a fun interview with Tucker. I love talking to Tucker. So he's and it's funny because he one of the things that really haunts him is he supported the Iraq War in 2004. And he said to me, I am going to do everything I can to, he didn't say I'm trying to make up for it, but that's a way of describing what he's doing. He's worked so hard to stop this war. It's unbelievable, taking enormous personal risk. He's doing everything he can to protect people and stop it. So I'm very grateful. But it's always very fun to talk with him. So, yeah.
Well, tell us where to get to Solari again, and we'll close out.
solari.com, or just do a search for my name. You'll pull it up. And again, click over to the Financial Transaction Freedom website. There's so much you can do. Go through Coming Clean to see what you can do in your own life. Because the beauty of this, David, the more I get the parasite out of my bank accounts and out of my head and my life, the safer I am. But the safer I make everybody else because I'm not feeding the parasite and the parasite's getting weaker. So, make yourself stronger in a way that weakens the parasite. It helps everybody.
Very good.
Right.
Well, thank you. Hopefully we'll get to do this again.